Hello, and welcome to FinInvest Niger. My name is Anton Princeville. I'm a certified securities and investment specialist, and I've been investing for the past 20 years. And in the course of this video, I want to talk about mutual funds under First Asset Management. First Asset Management is an asset manager, a prominent asset manager in the country, and it's somewhat linked to First Bank of Nigeria. And I want to talk about how to invest in the mutual funds that are managed by First Asset Managers. So these are the funds categories here. You have the money market fund, the bond fund, you have the Halal fund, dollar fund, specialized dollar fund, balance fund, smart beta equity fund, and then lastly, blended dollar funds. So these are the classes of funds that come under the umbrella of First Asset Management. So you discover that these are the criteria we're going to be discussing the funds under. The first item here is a minimum investment. For the money market fund, the minimum investment there is 50,000 naira. That's the minimum you are expected to invest in the First Asset Managers money market fund. You invest 50,000 naira. That's the minimum balance, minimum capital, and then the holding period is 30 days. In other words, you don't liquidate your fund, you don't liquidate your portfolio before 30 days. If you do that, you may likely incur penalties. So the minimum holding period for this particular fund is 30 days. The next item here is the fund size. The fund size represents the overall size, how big the fund is in terms of the asset under management. The fund here is has a size of 696 billion naira. 696 billion naira is the size of the fund, and the fund yielded 20.21%. 20.21%. That was the yield over a period of 12 months. And it might interest you to know that the fund has this particular asset under management. It has it invests in treasury bills, certificate of in commercial papers, as well as bank deposit. That is the main asset that is under management, for this particular fund is concerned. They invest in this particular class of assets. You have on treasury bills, you have on commercial papers, as well as some bank deposits. So these three assets constitute a bulk of the assets the fund deals with. The next one here is the bond fund. For the bond fund here, the initial capital is 50,000 naira. If you want to invest in the bond fund, you must be willing to put down 50,000 naira. And then the holding period is 90 days. The minimum holding period is 90 days. Should in case you want to liquidate your holding, you want to sell your position in the fund before 90 days, they will charge you a penalty fee for not maintaining the fund or maintaining your holding for as much as 3 months. And the fund size here is 111.52 billion naira is the fund size. So the fund is has this particular capital under management, and the yield in the span of 12 months was 4.30%. 4.30%. Well, there's nothing really surprising about it, because generally when it comes to bond investing, the yield is always minimal. It's relatively small compared to other asset classes. Because essentially, fund is not a vehicle for wealth creation. Bond isn't a vehicle for wealth creation. Bond essentially is, bonds are used for wealth preservation. All right. And so they invest largely in bonds, different kind of bonds, as well as money market instruments. So that is the asset that these particular bond funds tend to invest in. Now we come to the next one. Is this is Halal fund. The Halal fund is a kind of Sharia compliant fund. It's a kind of Sharia compliant investment vehicle. So they invest with Sharia principle in mind. In this case, the minimum capital here is 5,000 naira. That's the minimum capital, 5,000 naira, and you are expected to hold their position for 90 days. All right, 90 days, and the fund size, that's the capital under management, is 5.09 billion naira, and the fund made had a yield of 15.58% over a span of 12 months. And this is bigger than what is obtainable, you know, uh, with the bond fund. And this fund, the Halal fund, principally they invest in the federal government of Nigeria, Sukuk B. This is bond. So they invest essentially in what is called the Sukuk bond. Sukuk bond is a Sharia, is Islamic compliance, investment vehicle, investment bond. That is what these Halal fund invest most of their capital in. And the next one here is the dollar fund. The dollar fund essentially deals in dollars, the US dollars, and in this case, the minimum investment isn't in naira. You invest in dollars. So in this case, you are investing $100 minimum. That should be around 140 something thousand naira, according to the recent exchange rate. So you have to hold the fund for 180 days. All right, 180 days is the holding period, and the fund here has this $40.17 million dollars. This is a very huge amount of money in naira terms, because $1 million is about 1.45 billion naira. So this particular fund here should be over 50 billion naira. And so the fund yielded 8.05%. That was the yield over a span of 12 months. And they invest essentially in bonds, in money market instruments, as well as some U.S. Treasury bills. U.S. Treasury being, a dollar dominated fund. They invest in the U.S., in the U.S. and in U.S. and Treasury bill, money market fund, as well as some, Euro bonds, bonds outside the country and probably inside the country as well. Then the next one is specialized dollar fund. The specialized dollar fund has a bigger capital, a bigger minimum investment amount. So in this case, instead of investing $100, you are putting in $10,000. $10,000 is a huge amount of money in naira. That's what we're expected to put in as the initial investment, and you are expected to hold your fund for 180 days. And the fund assets here, or the fund size here, is $112.98 million dollars. It's a very huge amount of money in naira terms. All right, and so the yield over the past 12 months was 8.86%. 8.86%. All right, and so they invest essentially in US Treasury bills. They also invest in money market instruments as well as bonds. They invest in bonds as well. All right. And so we now come to the next one, which is the balanced fund. The balanced fund here requires a capital of 50,000 naira. 50,000 naira is the minimum capital you could invest with, and the holding period is a minimum of 90 days. That's roughly 3 months. And the balance fund had a very good result, returns, yield, and it yielded 45.23%. All right. In other words, assuming you invested a million naira, you have 452,300 naira, almost close to half a million naira in returns. So the fund invests in equity, that's stocks. They invest in money market instruments as well as in bonds. So these are the asset class under the balance fund. So the next one is the smart beta equity fund. The smart beta equity fund is also, a fund being managed by First Asset Management, and the initial capital here is 50,000 naira. That's the initial capital, 50,000 naira, and the minimum holding period is 90 days. That is 3 months. And this particular fund, this is the fund size. That's the assets. The fund, overall assets is 2.83 billion naira. 2.83 billion naira. And the return here is somewhat, fantastic. It is 56.83%. That's if you had invested a million naira, you have 568,300 naira as your profit, your gains, your returns. And so the fund essentially invests in equity, that's stocks. They invest in money market instruments as well as different classes of bonds. Now, we come to the last one here, the blended dollar fund. The blended dollar fund. This particular asset manager, they have about one, two, three, different variety of dollar dominated, fund. For the blended dollar fund, the initial capital here is $10,000, and you are expected to hold your investment for a minimum of 182 days. 182 days. And the value of the overall fund is 496,000 US dollars. 496.3 thousand US dollars. And then the fund yielded 14.42%. Over the span of a year, roughly 12 months. And they invest essentially in equities, in bonds, and in US money market instruments. Okay, and so these are the classes of funds that are being managed by First Asset Management. First Asset Management. I told us earlier, this is a subsidiary of First Bank of Nigeria, and it might interest you because I come across people asking a lot of questions, particularly regarding or related to how they could invest in these funds. And they equally they are so keen about any investment apps they could download to aid them in this investment. So in this case, the apps you could use to invest in these particular funds, are federal as the FBNH apps. FBNH apps. So if you go to Play Store, simply type in FBN. FBN should be maybe First Bank of Nigeria, something of that nature. But it's FBNH. Look at it here. FBNH apps. So once you download the app, you signed up, you have access to all these funds. All right. As long as you have the initial minimum deposit, you are free to, you are up. You are good to go. Please subscribe to this channel if not done that. Like this video and share it to members of your community also, so that I will be able to meet up with my targets of reaching out to 1 million Nigerians with this message of investing in in the country. I want to highlight one particular fact. As it relates to this table, you're going to discover that the highest returns here is the smart beta equity fund. It's not only peculiar to this particular asset manager, even in IBTs and other asset management companies, usually the highest returns when it comes to mutual funds are the equity related ones. Look at it here, equity fund. That is, in other words, a bulk of their investments, are in the stock market. All right, they dedicate a huge part of their capital into investing in stocks. That is why you see this level of returns. So the higher the stock constituents, as the stock market does well, that is how the mutual fund that is equity related, equity dominated, will also do fine in the markets. Once you want to invest in a mutual fund, ask yourself what portion of it is dedicated to the equities market. The higher the portion, the better the better the result you are going to get at the end of the day. So thank you very much for watching. You could also look at the channel, and there are related videos also that will help you to be better grounded when it comes to investing.